bit of an argument at the moment about the use of AI in generating reports and things like this. I didn't load the article, but there was an article this morning from the Bank of England, I think, that suggests or implies we're in an AI bubble. It has all the hallmarks of an investment bubble, like the internet bubble or the dot-com bubble of the early thousands. That there isn't the return being received. There's a lot of money going in, but not much coming back out, or not the value that's being seen. And so they're concerned it's obviously overheated. Now, some people criticise and say, well, that's because the UK doesn't have any AI industry as such. It also sort of raises questions about what people expect AI to be able to do. The fact it's pretty much just a big chatbot that can go and it's a search engine chatbot. Doesn't understand what it's returning, and people unwittingly trust it when there is no trust to be had with it. But the other part of it too is the more refined things are more business rules, hard-coded business rules. And that's been the case for, well, at least a couple of decades in software dev, that hard coding a business rule into a software doesn't make it AI or smart. It's just business rules. It'll expedite processes and things like that. There are certain things that IT systems are very, very good at doing. Doesn't mean they're smart. If you can codify the business rule, you can probably develop a software application that'll automate it. Yep, cool. And if it's an iterative process, even better. But it doesn't comprehend what it's doing. It's just taking numbers in and churning them and spitting numbers or spitting data back out. Garbage in, garbage out problem. However, the idea that people have placed this excessive trust in those systems, I could probably dig up articles from 2026, 5? Yeah, 20 years ago now. I could find articles from 20 years ago talking about this same sort of stuff. And there's the insane aspects around it. It hasn't changed. It's just become more public, it's somehow taken off in the public's awareness. It's like cloud computing. Everything is someone's server somewhere. That's what the cloud is. It's just somebody else's server somewhere else. You're paying for server space somewhere else. Now, is it tied to a very specific physical piece of hardware that you can go to a colo and kick? Well, at some point it is. Whether or not it's a virtualized asset, so a piece of hardware that hosts multiple instances, yeah, quite possibly. It's still a piece of hardware you can go and kick. But it's a consolidation of those into major service providers, and really that's what it is. That's all the cloud is somebody else's server hardware and storage hardware. And there are outages of the cloud service providers because their colo sites have fallen over, or in the case of Cloudflare, they've had issues with balancing, they've had issues. There's all sorts of this sort of stuff. It's technology that's been around for decades. Some of the interconnects have gotten a bit better. They've found use cases for them a lot better. They're not solutions in search of problems as much anymore. The marketing for them certainly got a lot better. People found a way to describe them to end users in a way that they felt like they wanted to go and use them and implement them. That's the big change. So these LLMs and everything else, they're evolutions of they're a natural evolution of systems that were developed and have been developed in some cases for decades. You can find, I guess, some of the theory behind it in papers from really the 70s and stuff. I can look at there's AI papers and books and stuff, from way back when. And ultimately these are chatbots in a way. And So just because the tech doesn't match the marketing isn't necessarily a fault of the tech. It could be, but it's not. So it's a case of if people buying into the marketing and the marketing being wrong. Bit like, I guess, the whole what's a gigabyte? How do you define a gigabyte? Is it what's the SI unit? Is it a binary thing or is it a base 10 thing? And then trying to rename things, and it's like, no, it doesn't work. No one's going to buy into it. No one does. It's all too hard. So failure to follow guidelines is putting organisations at risk of receiving error-ridden work from professional services. Well, yeah, there's people being criticised for over-trusting the returns and using it in, say, legal submissions and decisions like that. There's a lot of scary things going on where people just whole blindly go with it. Anyway, Deloitte has been forced to provide a partial refund to the federal government after it used AI in the creation of a close to $500,000 report for the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations. DWA, I think they call it. I mean DEWR, but I think they pronounce it DWA. The report was quietly updated online last week to delete references and footnotes to people and papers that don't exist. No one checked the work. The report's conclusions did not change with the update. Well, that's probably because if anyone's ever been involved with writing reports like this, people generally start with an outcome and then write the paper to fit. There are clear guidelines available to the big firms on how to use AI safely, blah, 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 blah. But the idea that it's challenging how the consulting industry works, but it's just the idea that they're complaining that the consultancy sector is under pressure in recent years. Well, because of bad behaviour, PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, shared confidential tax information. KPMG's lost 2/3 of its government income. PwC has left the income. Ernst & Young has shrunk too. Deloitte, it's kept it. But the big four, now five if you include Accenture, they're not hiring as much. I don't think it's AI causing it. I think a lot of government acquisition stuff, I think there's a lot of people either have hung their own shingle out, and so the smaller level contracts are being done by boutique firms or independent contractors. The big four / big five obviously are there for the major works. The whole consulting government work thing comes and goes in waves and cycles. So it'll be, for a period of years, there'll be a massive number of public servants so they can do the work in-house, and then there'll be a cut to the public sector. A lot of those people will then go across to the consulting firms, earn more money, and come back into the office and do the same job, but be doing it for one of the consulting firms. And then, so the cycle is they cut down on the public sector, but then the work still has to be done, so it's contracted out, and these bigger companies come along to handle the larger service delivery contracts. And then there comes a phase where contract spending is cut, and they try and boost the public service hiring again, so then people leave the contracting services, wander back in, re-sign with the public service, show back up in the office, and carry on with the same work. Okay, that might be a little bit cynical, but that is kind of the cycle of how this all works. At the moment, this idea that, the industry's hurting for acquisition and numbers, well, there was, and I did talk about this the other week, about job numbers and how the industry, how employment has rebounded after or changed after the pandemic. There was that figure given in the ABS well, in the newspaper article about the ABS report, that traditional hiring ratios, public sector, private sector, is about 1 to 4, 1 to 3. So about 25% of the 25 to a quarter to 1/3 of the jobs being filled at any given point in time will normally be government or public sector employment, and then the remaining 3/4 to 2/3 is private sector, so non-governmental employment. Since the pandemic, the figures, according to the ABS, are the other way around. Basically, 3/4 of employment that has taken place post-pandemic has been public sector. Now, whether that's people on contracts or full-time, I'm not 100% sure, but it's a massive change to the normal patterns of employment. Now, that has flow-on effects for places like the ACT, where you have a very, very large sector of your large percentage of your employee. Let me start that again. Like the ACT, where a very large percentage of employees work in the public sector because it's basically filled with government agencies. And then even the non-governmental employment sector is heavily dependent on those public service employees being around. So when there's an axe to go through the public sector, you'd expect places like the ACT to fear it more than other places. And the portability of jobs may not be as great because, well, you're now competing with a lot more people who also received the cut at the same time. Yeah. Anyway, so the fact we've had a over-representative amount of employment in the public sector and a decline in the job ads for the consulting firms, okay, I mean, it could just be a cyclical thing, a part of the normal cycle. It sounds a bit more than that at the moment, but it could just be a normal cycle thing. It's not AI or anything. Everyone's using it or doing it. But it'll be, give it 2 or 3 years, maybe, by 2030, another 5 years, we should see that cycle shift again. I think the last big cut, obviously the pandemic changed the cycle timings as well. 2010, 2012, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, it's about 10 years since the last big set of axe swings went through contractors. And not all government agencies did it at the same time. Actually, did they? No, there was. I mean, they're all within a couple of years of each other. There was a big swing of the axe for contractors in that 2015-ish timeframe. It's 10 years later. I think they had a bit of an upswing. Now it's going downswing again. We'll see what comes up next in the next 5 years or so. And of course, the behaviour of the consulting firms didn't help. And funnily enough, when you talk about organisations involved with gender pay imbalance, it was these major consulting firms where it's found some of the worst examples existed of people on different pay for the same work. So, I mean, people like to hate on the consulting firms. They see them as a waste of space.